I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that we get to do this together today, yeah? All right. Hey, listen, don't mind me. I mean, if you need to get up and move, you just feel the freedom to do that. And grab some coffee in the back. Just make yourself at home, whatever you do, okay? Okay. Hey, I want to just dive right into this today and just connect you to Matthew chapter 11. That's where we're going to spend a few minutes of our time today. And we'll be all over the map a little bit. So if you got a Bible, Matthew chapter 11. Otherwise, it'll be on the screen. But let me just read this to you so we can get some context about what we're covering today. It says this. Matthew wrote this. He says, when Jesus finished placing this charge before his 12 disciples, he went on to teach and preach in their village. John, this is John the Baptist we're talking about right here. Not John the Apostle, John the Baptist, okay? We're going to reconnect with John the Baptist today. We've connected with him like so many times in the last 2 months. We looked at him, with the Zach and Liz story in December. And then at the beginning of this series, we talked about John the Baptist, and we'll get there in just a minute. But John the Baptist is talking about in this verse. John, meanwhile, had been locked up in prison. When he got wind of what Jesus was doing, he sent his own disciples to ask, "Are you the one we've been expecting, or are we still waiting?" Jesus told them, "Go back and tell John what's going on. The blind see, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the wretched of the earth learn that God is on their side." Is that not what we just sang? Was that not that song right there? And so Jesus' question, like reciprocal question, back at him, is this what you were expecting? And then he says, and then count yourselves most blessed. I do a lot of premarriage counseling, and first thing we talk about in premarriage counseling is, what are your expectations? Because we all have them, right? You all have expectations? Did you walk in today with an expectation? No? Yes, maybe? You expected that you would have coffee here today, didn't you? I mean, let's be honest. We had some expectations, didn't you? You had an expectation about how the environment would look. You had an expectation about it's going to be like semi-pleasant in here temperature-wise, and the person that you're going to be sitting next to is semi-pleasant. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out. I know, right? Jury's out right now. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. You had an expectation, didn't you? When it comes to marriage, the reason why that's the first thing I deal with when I talk about premarriage counseling is that we all have expectations, whether we talk about them or not. In fact, one of my goals that I deal with when I talk about expectations in premarriage counseling is to get them to kind of release what they are subconsciously expecting but have never even said. And we get to this spot where, 10 years down the road, and you've been married for a decade now, and now you've got some expectations, and my hope would be is that you actually kind of foresaw some of those things and you articulated them ahead of time. Otherwise, you're going to have some really, really fun conversations a couple weeks, days into it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't, this is not what I had in my mind of how this was going to go. I remember one of the things just to give you a little bit of insight, one of the things I say is that marriage is a magnifying glass. And once you get married, no matter how long you've been together or the dynamics of your relationship before you got married, as soon as you get married, there's a magnifying glass over your relationship and everything looks different. And I'll never forget the time that became most clear to me, but when I had a couple that had gotten married, they had been together for like 7 years. Had a child together, lived together, the whole bit, and so they were like, well, we're just going to get married. We already are, kind of, but we need to get married. And they got married, and one of them came to me like 3 months later, and they're like, everything's different. And I'm like, did I not tell you it was going to be, right? You thought I was lying to you? You have expectations. What are your expectations today? What are your expectations about life, about your kids, about your relationship, about your marriage, about whatever? In fact, ironically, Chris and I were having a conversation last night about expectations when it comes to our finances. We both have different perspectives on the way that life should be lived and the way that things should look. And so she's like, we really need to have a conversation about this. I'm like, we really do. I need to tell you what your expectations should be. No, I'm just kidding. But that's really how we act, isn't it? It's like, as long as you take my point of view, we'll be fine. No problems here. Like, let me change your expectations and teach you reality. That's how we live. That's how we think. That's how we learn. And so when Jesus or when John sends this representative to investigate and ask Jesus, hey, are you what we should be expecting? Big question mark. Now, I've studied for this message. Let me just get really transparent with you for a minute here. I started looking at this message like way back in December. and just really kind of prayerfully investigating it, reading through it. And usually I try to overview my sermon as best I can, like an initial glance. I got to this text, and I wrote nothing down. I'm like, God, I have no idea what you want to do with this. And it stayed that way for a long time. And I just kind of like, I'm the kind of guy that if I don't know the answer to the question, I just ignore the question. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I don't know, so let's just move on. Let's do something else. Now listen, I've also learned over the time that I don't need to stress about these things because the Lord will give me what he wants me to have, even if it happens on Sunday morning. There's been a lot of times like that. It's where I'm learning to trust the movement of the Lord more than my preparation. But that doesn't mean that I don't prepare, okay? Don't hear what I'm not saying. But I sat down this week on Monday, and I just put my nose back in this, and I was like, okay, God, where are we going with this? And I saw some things that just blew my mind away. And I want to connect you to that because just a couple weeks ago, in January, whatever it was, whatever date, we talked about John the Baptist again. This is the first week, I think, John chapter 1. No, it wasn't the first week, it was the second week. John chapter 1, we talked about where John the Baptist meets Jesus, and he's just emotional and emphatic, and was like, look, the Lamb of God takes away the sin of the world. Do you remember this? We talked about this. Do you? You get this? Remember, we talked about when emotion matches event, and the event of our life, the event that John the Baptist is going through, and his emotion just went through the roof because he's ecstatic about the fact that this is the guy that we've been looking for. This is what we've been preparing for. Look, there he is. He's coming our way. Who would have thought that he would be in our audience today? That's him. That's Jesus. That's the Messiah. He's the one we've been waiting for. And now we're however many, a year and a half later, John's in prison at this moment. JTB, John the Baptist, he's in prison at this moment. And he sends a representative to investigate Jesus, and he says, are you what we've been expecting? What happened? Where did his disbelief enter into this mix? Where he's now, at one point, he's emphatic, emotional. That's Jesus, the one we've been waiting for. And now here he is a year later, and he's like, I'm not quite sure. That just blew my mind. Like, how do we get to this spot where this guy, like, designated or destined from birth to be the person to usher in and make way for Jesus, is now questioning if he even is God? This is puzzling to me. He was really, really confident right up until the moment that his situation changed. I mean, it's really easy to pave the way for the Lord when you're not in prison. I mean, who's to think that this guy didn't have some sort of like super confidence and almost like a escape clause? This is, those bad things aren't going to happen to me because I am who I am. And I can have this profound confidence in God right up until the moment that everything changes. And then isn't it in that moment that we kind of lose almost all semblance of ourselves? Here's the other reality. When you talk about expectations and this kind of thing, I can be good with my expectations. I can be good with a desperate situation because I know it's what to expect, right? I mean, here's John the Baptist. He has he's got nothing to say for himself other than, I'm called by God to be God's messenger. I get to eat locust. That's what he does. And at the end of the day, he goes to bed every night, sleeps just fine, knowing that in the morning he gets to eat more grasshoppers. And I can be fine with that because I know that's what to expect. But as soon as my situation changes, my security is gone. I have no idea what to do with myself now because it's not what I expected. What did you expect? What did you expect this was going to be when you said yes to a Savior? What did you think it was going to look like when you said, yes, God, yes, I will? It didn't occur to me that it would look like that. I didn't think that that's what he had in mind. This is way different than what I thought was going to happen. This actually plays out several other places in the Bible. Think of Peter and the disciples, apostles, as they're crossing that lake, the stormy lake, where Jesus kind of set them out like on this test, and Jesus walks by them in the night, and Peter's like, hey, if you're God, let me come to you. Let me walk to you on the water. And as soon as he steps out of the boat, I mean, we all look at that and be like, oh, what great faith. This is awesome. I wish I could do that. That'd be so cool. And as soon as he gets as soon as he steps foot and watches the winds and the wave, the situation changes, and he begins to question. He begins to doubt. Can you actually do what you say you can do? I'm going to die right now. His situation changes, and so does my faith. So does my theology. One of the other things that Chris and I were talking about last night was about each of our kids, and how do we intentionally pour into them a relationship with Christ rather than just hoping they happen upon it. You know what I mean? Well, I'll get them to church, and the church will do the rest. Wow, that's a lot of pressure on us, okay? Like, listen, we work together, okay? Our job is just to back you up with what you do. That's how this works, not the other way around. But it takes a lot of intentionality. And so Crystal, because the Lord has just really impressed this upon her heart, she's actually thinking about this, and how do we, what do we see in each one of our children that we can build into them and foster them and help them understand the love and grace of Jesus. And so when it comes to Taylor, we recognize that Taylor has this almost fake confidence. She just has none, and it's so troubling to us about how do we help her engage in who she is and get a real God confidence rather than it seems like she matches her confidence based on whoever she's around. It changes. She's chameleon all the time, and that's so troubling to us because she can be such a brilliant little girl. And what I need us to understand, because all of us act in some of the same sense sometimes, is that if my confidence is not tied to truth, then it's just my opinion. If my confidence isn't tied to some form of truth, then it's just my opinion. And so I want to tie her to truth. I got a question for you. Is it wrong? Do you ever feel like it's okay to question your belief? Is it wrong? Do you struggle with that? I feel like you need to understand that it's not wrong. It's never wrong to question belief. It's never wrong to question the validity of truth. But the dangerous spot with questioning truth is throwing all truth out the window. You have to have some sort of cornerstone that you can resort back to and say, when everything else goes out the window, at least I know that is true. Okay? You've got to have something to anchor to. If you don't have anything to anchor to, then anything that looks good will sound good and feel good and be good, and because I thought it was good. You know what I mean? Make sure that when you're asking questions about what is true, that you have some place that you go to and say, I know that's true. Now, let's press into this a little bit more. Do you trust me? Okay, that's good, but don't take that too far, because I'll disappoint you. I promise you I will. I've done it a lot. I don't want you to just trust me. My goal and my hope is that I lead you to an amazing Savior. That's my job. That's my passion. That's what I want to do. But I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. So don't just listen to me. My job and my passion is to connect you to the vision and values of Grand Point Church, because it's reputable, and I hope that you can trust that. And all of that, me, Grand Point Church as a whole, are tied to one truth. We're tied to the Word of God, and that has to be our cornerstone. If it's not our cornerstone, I don't know that I can help you. I don't know that I can answer any of your questions if the Bible goes out the window too. Does that make sense? You've got to establish that at least I know that that's true. If you struggle with that, yeah, we can work on that. It takes a little more time and a little bit more concerted effort, I promise you. But we've got to believe that something is truth. My friend Aaron tells me between services, he's like, I loved your point on that. He says, what I find in my life is that oftentimes we throw the Bible out the window and stay secure in our situation. That's where I find truth. Do you struggle with that too? Because I do. When my situation changed, I wonder, what are you doing? And how do I know how to navigate this? And how to plow through this? I think this is where we find John today. John is questioning, are you actually God? Are you the one who we've been looking for, even though that I've been telling the world that you're the one that we've been looking for? He's imprisoned. He's about to lose his head. He doesn't know that at this point. He's going to die. He's not coming out of this mess. Can you imagine how intently John must have been praying? through these moments? You ever prayed really, really hard for something? Y'all look at me like deer in headlights. Have you ever prayed really hard for something? And have you ever been disappointed with the outcome? Oh, that messes with your theology. Messes with everything about you. When you can see something that is just not too hard, you would think it's not too hard for God to answer. How could God not want this? How could this not be the Lord's plan? And yet it seems like he just walks in the other direction. Have you ever been in a place where you're praying so intently about something and you feel like the Lord is indifferent to it? Like he just doesn't even care? Tell me that doesn't mess with your theology. I just totally imagine that that's where John the Baptist is at in this. How could you not want me out of this prison, Lord? I've been doing so many good things. I mean, what bad thing did he have to say for himself? What bad thing did anybody else have to say for himself? Nothing. So how is this God's plan? And we just sang this song. I like all of our songs, the whole set list today. But specifically that song, There's Another in the Fire. And then I love what our team does with it, and they just kind of like add to it. Even if it doesn't, I'm standing strong. I kind of wonder, like every time we say those words, I'm like, what if he doesn't? At what point do we not stand strong anymore? At what point do we just give up? Because this wasn't what I expected. Listen, my job today, my goal today is not to get you to question theology. My goal today is to get you to understand the truth and the security in who our Savior is. You know, the other song, one of my favorites right now is this Waymaker. I love just Waymaker. It's such a good song. But the middle of that song, Waymaker, Promise Keeper, Light in the Darkness. Well, in John the Baptist in this day, there was no way to be made. It was made. It made it right into prison. And the promise had already been kept. The promise was Jesus. There was no promise about John in this. And the darkness of the dungeon would never subside. And so that's where we just look at this and be like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Listen, I need to understand this. Remember this. His plans are always more than your plans. Can I get a witness? His plans are always more than your plans. But now let's take the hard truth and the hard reality of that. He doesn't owe you an explanation about his plans. I'm sorry. He doesn't have to clear his plans with you first. Remember, you're the created, not the creator. He doesn't owe you anything when it comes to his plan. It's his plan. And it doesn't have to make sense to us. At the end of the day, it doesn't have to even benefit or bless us. They're his plans. And they're perfect in spite of your circumstance. It is hard to swallow. Matthew 11:1, let's go back to this verse. When Jesus finished placing this charge before his 12 disciples, he went on to teach and preach in their villages. Well, what charge is Matthew talking about in this? Clearly, he's relating back to Matthew chapter 10. He's talking about the story that just took place. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus commissions 72 of his disciples. You all know that he had more than just 12, right? He had a big group of people. He identifies 72 people, commissions them, empowers them, and sends them out on a mission trip, right? And it says this. It says in verse number 5, Matthew chapter 10, Jesus sent his 12 harvest hands out with his charge. Don't begin by traveling to some far-off place to convert unbelievers. Now, wait a minute. Tell me that doesn't mess with your theology. Jesus just said, don't go to those people. What? Isn't that exactly what we're supposed to do? No, he had a specific mission. Don't try to be dramatic by tackling some public enemy. Go to the lost, confused people right here in the neighborhood. Tell them that the kingdom is here. Bring health to the sick, raise the dead, touch the untouchables, bring out the demons. You've been treated generously, and so live generously. This sounds like an amazing missions experience. Have you ever been on one? My goodness, we should just go. Who's with me? As long as we get tacos on the way, right? Like, yes. Mm-hmm. That's right. No, just tacos. It just takes tacos. Look at this. Every time I've read this passage, I've missed this. When Jesus finished placing this charge, that one that we just read, before his 12 disciples, he went on to teach and preach where? Where? Say it, read it. Where? Where did he go? He went to their house. Doesn't that sound amazing to you? Wouldn't you just love to bring Jesus to your house? He could have gone anywhere, couldn't he? He couldn't have just been like, I have to go to Samaria today. I mean, he did say that at one point. But no, he's like, I've got to go to where you're from. I need us to understand that you and I are passionate about our families connecting to Jesus, aren't we? Tell me I'm wrong. You are passionate about helping your family understand the life-saving truth that's found in Jesus Christ. I mean, when these people believed it, they went on a mission for it, and when they come back, Jesus is like, hey, let's go to where you're from. Let's just go there. You are tied directly to your family's relationship with Jesus. It is super powerful. You're the way maker, man. It comes through you. It happens through you. It happens because of what God has already done in your heart and in your life. I love this. Well, I don't love this at all, actually. But I sat down with somebody just recently and just asked them how their week was, and they were like, it's been a terrible week. Terrible start to the year. How many of you have had a terrible start to the year? No, just keep it to yourself. But this person was like, it's been awful. I was in the hospital, had the norovirus. You all know what the norovirus is? It's like the super stomach flu. And I was like, can you sit a little farther back, please? Can you... Pardon me a minute as I put gloves on. You know what I'm saying? Wash your hands, right? This is bad. But it's one of those things where you are, as soon as you hear it pronounced, you're destined to get it. All they have to do is say stomach flu, and you're like, I feel like my stomach hurts. You know what I'm saying? Isn't it true? It's awful. And you're like, why are you talking about this? Because now all your stomachs hurt, right? Man, the gospel of Jesus is the worldwide pandemic. It's the same thing. You know what the only limiter is? You. You're the antidote. It stops with you. It stops when you stop believing. It stops when you stop understanding the worldwide impact that you have. I mean, can we just look at the correlation for just a minute? When Jesus says, what did you expect, John? What did you expect? And without even answering his questions, he just heals people, raises the dead, blind see, lame walk. And what did we see, just the chapter before that, in Matthew chapter 10, he commissioned and sent out his disciples to do what? To bring health to the sick, to raise the dead, to touch the untouchables, to kick out the demons. Exactly the things that we thought only Jesus could do. You have an incredible power at your disposal. What are you doing with it? Check this out, Luke chapter 10. This is the same story explained in a different scenario. Luke chapter 10, Luke records this. He talks about the 72. When the 72 disciples returned, they joyfully reported, Lord, even the demons obeyed us when we use your name. And I love this response. I've used this in so many just notes of encouragement to people. He said, yes, he told them. He said, I saw Satan fall like heaven, like lightning. It's the most encouraging thing that Jesus could have told these people. You made a huge impact. Satan's scared of you. Isn't that not encouraging to these guys? Like, you moved heaven and earth. This was amazing. He says, look, I've given you authority over all the power of the enemy, and you can walk among snakes and scorpions and crush them. Nothing will injure you, but don't rejoice because evil spirits obey you. Rejoice because your name is registered in heaven. Hey, what are you expecting? When you walked into this relationship with God, what did you expect it would become? What did you envision that it would be, that it would flesh out like? What is this? Let me just read this to you one more time. John had been locked up in prison. When he got wind of what Jesus was doing, he sent his own disciples to ask, are you the one that we've been expecting? Or are we still waiting? And Jesus told them, go back, tell John what's going on. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the wretched of the earth learn that God is on their side. Is that what you were expecting? What did you expect? Did you expect it would just be amazing for you? I mean, this could be 1,000 different directions, and I feel like this is where I have to stop. Because I can't speak directly into what you were expecting. What did you think? What do you come to today, and what do you struggle with when it comes to your belief? Is it what you thought it would be? Did he do something different that you had hoped he would do? Did you envision your life unfolding and unpacking in a different manner that's leaving you disappointed today? That you begin to wonder and question and look at this God and be like, I don't know what you're thinking. I can't wrap any semblance of anything around you. This is not what I expected. This is not what I hoped for. This is different than I imagined it would be. And my scenario, my situation where I am right now is totally different. What am I supposed to do? Listen, I feel like I just need to leave it there. And I just need to ask you to just get before God right now. Just bow your heads and close your eyes and put yourself at the feet of Jesus and say, God, what do I do? Some of you, it needs to become an element of acceptance. God, I accept the position that you've put me in. I don't understand, God, why. I don't understand why you won't release me from this. I mean, are some of you sitting in that prison cell like John the Baptist today and are wondering, God, when are you going to release me? When are you going to set me out? I can be so much more effective out there, God. Maybe the answer that you get back today is the same thing he told Paul. Hey, my grace is good enough for you too. It's good right where you're at. Don't question it. Don't wrestle with it. I got a plan. Oh, that's tough. It's tough to swallow. Lord, I want to just pray over this church as they struggle and as they wrestle through the realities and some of the difficulties of their lives right now. Lord, questions of belief are so hard to navigate through. We don't know what to do. In fact, God, in our insecurity, oftentimes we try to change our situation by grabbing whatever looks good because we want to be back in control. We want to put some semblance of fulfillable expectation back in sight. God, I just pray over our church, Lord, that we would learn to trust you in spite of our situation rather than try to change the situation. God, the reality is that you're in control of all of it. And all we have to do is just submit to you. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look good to me. This is not what I would have chosen, Lord, but it's where you have me today. And so, Lord, I just pray over this church as they wrestle with this. God, show them what to do. Don't hold out. Don't make them wait long. Give them some answers so that they can know and understand, Lord, the truthfulness of where you are and where you're at work and the goodness and the grace that you have and you hold and that you behold.